Welcome to a podcast of Be Brilliant with Jing Lang. I'm your host, Jing Lang. Today's guest is Chris Potter. Potter? Yes. Chris is principal of Northern Investment, and Chris also serves on the board of You Can Free Us. He's the founder of All the Little Ones. And Chris also spent a lot of time volunteering for an animal rescue organization. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jing. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And I understand you have a rescue yourself. Her name is Moo. Tell us more about her.
Yeah, Moo is the breed is called a Canaan. She was a street dog in India.
Wow.
And I help out with a rescue organization in New York and New Jersey that rescues dogs from all over the world. And I do some of the pickups when they come into JFK and Newark. And she was one of the dogs that I picked up and fostered and ended up keeping.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How long have you had her?
I've had her for 4 years now.
Wow. And when you picked her up, was that like, have you been picking up dogs for a while when you had her?
Yeah, I've been picking up dogs for maybe a year, 18 months.
When did you start?
I started doing that in 2020 or 2021. It was in the beginning of COVID.
Right.
And I had found this organization online, and I had called to ask if there's anything I could do to help. And they said, well, do you have a car? And I said, yes. And they said, do you mind going to the airport and picking up a dog? I can't remember if it was that day or the next day. And that was the beginning of many airport pickups of dogs from all over the world.
What's the name of the organization?
It's called Zany's Furry Friends.
Is it mostly dogs?
It's mostly dogs, some cats, but mostly dogs.
There was a case you mentioned that there were a number of cats during one transport.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of cat pickups because I'm allergic to cats. But there was a situation a few years ago where some cats needed to be brought out to a rescue organization in Long Island. And I didn't know how many cats it was going to be, but when I got there, I think there were 24 cats, each in its own carrier. Right. So somehow I managed to get all of those packed into my car and make the 2-hour drive out to Long Island and deliver these cats. And for most of the trip, they were meowing, crying, singing. A friend of mine called partway through the trip, and he heard this noise in the background. He said, what on earth is that? And I said, you're not going to believe me if I told you, but it's 24 cats.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. The most I've handled is 7 cats at a time. And that was more than I can handle. So 24, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So I understand Moo is your foster Phil, as you mentioned. You fostered her before you end up adopting her.
Yeah, someone told me that it was a failed foster, and I took offense when they told me that because I didn't know what the meaning was. It just sounds
it's a compliment.
It sounds derogatory, but then I realized that it was actually a compliment. It means that you've decided to keep the foster.
Tell us the story of when you decided to keep her.
So when I first got her, for the first 3 months, she had such terrible separation anxiety that I couldn't leave her alone for even a minute. And she destroyed so many things in my apartment. And she turned out to be a great escape artist too. So she figured out how to unlock my front door and get out.
What?
Yeah.
How?
Different ways, but she was able to get both her paws up on the door handle and open the door, which undid the lock.
Wow.
And then, and she would even end up in the lobby sometimes because somehow she would either wait for the elevator for it to open, or I wouldn't put it past her. She might have even pushed the button with her paw.
Oh my God.
Anyways, I knew that I couldn't keep this dog because, I have to go to work and I have to do these other things.
Yeah.
And the shelter found an amazing family out in New Jersey. And I spoke with that woman on the phone one night to figure out if it was going to be a good home for Moo. Mm-hmm. And we make a long story short, decided that it would be a good fit. So we decided that I would deliver Moo to her the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, Moo had never once jumped on my bed. She always wanted her own space on the couch or on a chair, which was fine with me. And after I hung up the phone, I walked into the living room and Moo was sitting on the chair.
Yeah.
And it's going to sound weird, but I looked at her and I said out loud, if you want to stay here, you have to show me. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, she jumped off the chair, ran into my bedroom and dove on the bed and slept on the bed for the entire night. And that's the first and last time she's ever done that. And as soon as she did that, I was like, I guess I'm keeping her. But it's like she understood what I was telling her, and she was giving me a sign.
Girl, decide.
So, yeah, that was 3.5 years ago.
Oh my God, that's such a good story. So she's 6 now, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. I understand animal is not the only species that you help. Tell us about All the Little Ones Foundation. Where does the name come from?
So All the Little Ones is a private foundation that I started in 2010 to focus on helping organizations that are helping at-risk children and women. And the name comes from a verse in the book of Matthew in the New Testament, Matthew 18:10, where Jesus says, make sure that you take care of these little ones because their angels in heaven are always looking at the face of my Father in heaven. And I really like that verse, and it has so many meanings, but it just occurred to me that any angel that continually looks into the face of God must be a very powerful angel. I figured those must be God's battle angels. And if he assigns his battle angels to protect the innocent, then maybe we should be trying to do something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the genesis of the name.
Wow. And you always wanted to do something for women and children? Why those groups?
I guess I've always had a heart for the underdog, and more often than not, it's the women and the children that are the underdogs in a lot of the terrible things that go on around the world. Mm. So I started the foundation with that kind of loose goal in mind, and as time went on, I met people running unbelievable organizations that were focused on some of the most needy causes in that area. And the one that I spent the most time with is called You Can Free Us. And this is an amazing organization. It's an international human rights organization, mainly focused on India, mm-hmm. and mainly focused on rescuing women that have been trafficked into the red light districts. Oh, wow. In Mumbai and Calcutta.
How old are these women?
They're in their teens to early 20s.
How did they get there? Like, no one chose, I presume, that path.
No, it's the most horrific abuse of people that I've ever seen or ever read about in these red light districts. And most of it ultimately stems from poverty. And these young women are sold and betrayed by sometimes their families or people they trust. They're trafficked across borders. They're trafficked across the Bangladesh border, the Nepal border. They're trafficked from all over India. And the reason why we focus on India and not other places is it just happens to be that the problem is the worst there. And the red light districts in Mumbai and Calcutta are the biggest in the world. And they're as far as I can see. And every person in those areas is either a trafficked person, a customer, or someone who controls that business. And it's a very dark place. But you can free us through a very nuanced process, and usually with the help of law enforcement, rescues women out of this life. And we have safe houses in Mumbai and Calcutta. And you can imagine all of the medical and emotional healing that they need. And we try to give them all of those things, and we give them an education, and we try and figure out what each one of them dreams about doing. So we don't teach them all. We don't teach them all to do the same thing. We try and figure out, do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a chef? And our women in our safe houses go on to do those things.
Wow.
And to get married, and their lives and their futures get rewritten.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of effort first to be able to rescue them. How does that happen, if I may ask some of the tactical details? Like, how do you rescue someone who's currently owned possibly by someone else to be free?
It's a good question. And I think a lot of people think that the way to do it is to go in guns blazing and, yank them out of this lifestyle.
Yeah, kick down the door.
But it's such a prolific problem, and it's such big business. I mean, it's a whole economy unto itself. And it's a much more nuanced process. So we have people who go into the red light districts and get to know the people, get to know the women, get to know the people who are running these brothels. And they work with law enforcement to...
As like undercover?
Sometimes it's undercover. And the way that the rescues are done changes over time. But sometimes sometimes the police do a raid, and the women that are pulled out are then given to us to take care of in our safe houses. Sometimes it's a one-off case where one of our staff will get to know, will befriend one of the women in the red light district, and then figure out a way how to get her out.
Yeah, wow.
Lots of different ways, but it's not a frontal assault.
No, of course not. How much does it cost once someone is rescued to keep her housed and educated, and integration rehab process?
It's about $500 a month.
That's it?
Yeah.
US, 500 US a month.
Yeah.
Wow. And how long do they stay in the program?
They're usually with us for about 2 years.
That's a lot that can add up.
Yeah.
How many are there right now, if you can disclose that figure in the program?
Yeah, so we're taking care of 38 women right now.
Wow. In different safe houses, and they're somewhere in the 2-year journey.
Yeah, so we have 3 safe houses in Mumbai and 1 in Calcutta. And we also, a few years ago, Sujo John, who runs You Can Free Us, is an amazing guy, and he has contacts and relationships with amazing people all over the world. And he's very good with strategic thinking and thinking about, what can we do next? And a few years ago, he had the idea of starting schools in India that would be focused on helping children who were vulnerable to forced child labor, of which there are many in India. And so we started our first school in Mumbai. Let's see, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
And it's called Udan. And Udan means taking flight.
Oh, I saw.
So we wanted to give these children who would otherwise be in garbage dumps, spending their days picking up textiles and pieces of metal for sale for pennies. We wanted to give them a chance for a different life. And so we give them 2 meals a day.
Yeah.
And they get an amazing education, and they get a chance to lead a better life than they would have had otherwise.
Wow.
And so we now have 2 schools in Mumbai, and we just opened one on the India-Bangladesh border.
Nice.
And I was just in India a few months ago for the opening of that one.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
That's
So,
one for humanity.
yeah. So we have about 550 kids in the program now, and we have programs for the parents as well.
Wow. How much does it cost for the kids?
$50 a month per kid.
50.
Yeah. So we're trying to get
1/10 of the other cost.
What's that?
1/10 of the other cost.
Yeah. But they're not living with us. You know,
Okay.
they're with us during the day.
Right.
And
Okay.
so our goal now is to get sponsorships for all of those kids. So that's our big push.
Sponsorship, as in donations sponsored?
Yeah. So we have a program now where people can sponsor a child. So you can go to the You Can Free Us website, and you can see the profiles of each of the children in our program, and you can decide if you want to be a sponsor for one of those children.
Do you have to choose a particular child, or can I just say I want to give to the program?
You can do either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I always find that it's more compelling when you can understand who the child is and what their background is and the challenges they faced.
And for the parents, you said there's programs. Is that also to help them to re-educate as well?
Yeah. So we have beauty salons in each of our schools.
Really?
In training centers where we can teach people how to do hair and makeup and things like that. Yeah.
That's so cool. Manicurist.
Yeah.
So that's a more general program compared to the individual women free from red light district, where you're trying to find individual dreams of theirs. Right. So that's a slightly different approach between the 2 organizations. Wow, that's really something, Chris. How long have you been in this space of, I will call this philanthropy?
Yeah. Well, I learned about You Can Free Us in 2016, and I heard the founder give a presentation, and I went up to him afterwards and I asked if I could help. And he said, "Don't give me any money now, but come to India." So about a month later, I was on a plane to India to see the work, and I've been involved ever since.
And you go there how often?
I go once or twice a year.
Wow. And you say you were just there, right? For the 3rd school opening.
Yeah, I was there in March.
I understand India is not the only country you go to. You were in Romania recently. Well, I guess a few years ago now, because how long the war has been dragging on. Tell us more about that.
So when the war in Ukraine started, I got a call from my friend Sujo at You Can Free Us, and he told me that he had a friend who was in southern Ukraine. He was a pastor of a church, and he had heard stories that none of the foreign aid that was pouring into Ukraine was getting to the south. It was all coming from into the north, from Poland and other places. And he said, "Do you want to go with me next week to help set up?"
What a way to invite.
To help set up a distribution system for generators and medical supplies and food into southern Ukraine. And I said, "Sure, let's go." So we went with a number of other members of the board, and it was an amazing trip. And sometimes logistically things just click. Well, that happened on this trip.
Wow.
And we were able to get all kinds of needed supplies into the country. And then a year later, I went with a friend who I met through this effort on a 11-hour car drive from Moldova into Western Ukraine to spend some time with widows and orphans that You Can Free Us had been helping. So when the initial distribution effort was complete, we we had raised a lot of funds.
Mm-hmm.
There was an outpouring of support in the U.S. And so we wanted to be responsible with the money that we had raised. We figured that the biggest need was to help widows, of which many had been made because of the war. So we ended up buying homes and cars for 14 of these young women.
Wow.
And it made a huge, huge difference in their lives.
For sure.
And I wanted to meet them.
Yeah.
And spend a little time with them and just let them know that we were there for them.
Oh, wow.
So we drove into Western Ukraine and spent a few days, which was an overwhelming trip, but it was in a good way.
Was it safe to go there?
I felt safe while I was there, but when I arrived and I met our host, who was this amazing, powerful, huge Ukrainian guy, he walked up to me and he wrapped his arms around me and he said in Ukrainian, and my friend was translating, "Chris, what made you think you could come here?" So I was nervous after he said that, but
what you don't know won't kill you.
But these are amazing people who have been through such horror, and I just hope that the war ends soon and that no more men have to go into this meat grinder.
Absolutely. This, however, isn't the only conflict zone you have been into.
I've been to others. A friend of mine named Favor runs this organization called Raising a Generation of Esthers. Of Esthers. Esthers is a famous Old Testament character, a woman who saves her people from a terrible fate. And she's a bold, courageous, amazing woman. And so Favor started this organization to help young women in Cameroon get an education. So to get scholarships for college, and she has a mentoring program for these young women.
Where is Cameroon?
Cameroon's in West Africa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And there's an ongoing rebel insurgency in that country, which I didn't fully appreciate. I knew there was one, but I didn't fully appreciate until I got there. But we were safe while we were there. I mean,
well, you're here to tell the tale, so.
But that was an amazing trip. There were certain areas where it would not have been good if our bus had broken down.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Wow.
Because we were in areas that were controlled by people that weren't exactly. They were not going to be friendly to us. Let me just put it that way.
Right.
But it all worked out, and it was great to be, a small encouragement to these people. And as always, I probably learned a lot more from them than they got from me.
Chris, you consistently put yourself in these kind of conditions or environments where maybe, again, for you, you feel you want to be there and there are people around you that try to make it safe. Mm-hmm. But if we look at it from the lens of, I guess, normal people, it's quite a lot of risk. Mm. Do you ever worry for your own safety? Let me just put it less diplomatically. What if you get killed? Who is going to carry your work forward?
So I don't think about it in those in those dramatic terms.
Okay.
I think there'll always be people to do this kind of work, and I feel blessed that I've been given the opportunity to be a part of it. And God has blessed me so much in my life that it's not difficult to want to, give back and share that goodness with other people.
So you're in the investment business. You have been for the past 30 years since Columbia Business School. Tell us more. Let's go back to our origin story for a bit. Tell us more about your upbringing leading to business school.
So I have an older brother and a younger sister, and the three of us were very fortunate to be brought up by two amazing parents who always led with compassion and integrity, and they were always tremendous encouragers to us through all the ups and downs. So, and I realized that a lot of people don't have that kind of support system, and I feel very fortunate to have had that. I was born in Virginia. My dad was in the Navy at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when he was done with his service, we moved to Long Island, New York. And several years later, he got a job in England. And we lived in London for 5 years, which was a ton of fun. And it was back in the day when, you'll get this analogy because you're from Canada and Canadians love hockey, but it was back in the day when parents didn't dress their kids in goalie gear before they sent them out to play, right? It was kind of a free-for-all. And so we would, during the summers, we would wake up and go downstairs and say, "See you later, Mom and Dad." And then we'd get on our skateboards and we would ride all over London. And it was a really fun, innocent time. When we moved back to the States, I went to different schools in New England, and I ended up going to college in upstate New York. And I moved to New York shortly after finishing my undergraduate degree, and I got a job at a manufacturing company, and I worked out of this gritty storefront office in Woodside, Queens. And I sold boiler room equipment.
So what?
Boiler room equipment.
Like furnace?
Yeah. Like
Wow.
equipment for, medium-sized boiler rooms for schools and housing complexes and things like that. It was a great job to learn about people and to learn about business. And there's a lot of interesting characters in that business. And it gave me a great education about New York because I spent most of my days in my car driving around New York.
Wow.
And I knew at that time, I knew nothing about investing and finance and accounting, but I was curious about those things. So I decided to leave that job and go to business school and get my master's degree.
That's unusual prerequisites for your. I imagine people who are in business school come from slightly different background than selling boiler room equipment.
Yeah, there was no one from my industry that I met at Columbia, but there were people from all different backgrounds. I mean, there was a commander of a nuclear submarine in my class.
Wow, that's so cool.
And of course, there were lots of people from Wall Street, from investment banking firms and consulting firms, but it was a pretty diverse group. Most of them had taken accounting and finance courses before getting there, so I was unusual in that sense. But sometimes when you learn something from scratch, it sticks longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I still have my notebooks from all those years ago from Columbia, and I refer to them every once in a while.
Do you ever want to go back to the sales business? Well, I guess investment is sales also in some aspects.
Yeah. I don't want to go back to, I'm not a good salesman.
No?
I don't think I'm a good salesman, no. But I really enjoy the investment business. I enjoy the research, and I like numbers, and I like seeing how all the numbers fit. And I like the fact that every day is different, and I get kind of a bird's eye view on what's next.
Tell us about your mentor, the one person who hired you out of university, out of business school, and you worked with for a while after.
So his name is Louis Lehrman, and I met him when I was a teenager. He was running for governor of New York. He was the Republican candidate for governor. Okay. And I worked as a volunteer on his campaign. And we kind of had kept in touch over the years. And when I graduated from Columbia, he offered me a job. He took a chance on me, which I'm forever grateful for. And I went to work for him shortly thereafter. And I spent 6 years at the fund that he had started.
Northern Border Investment, Canada. Let's talk about that tie of you and Canada.
Yeah. So Lou was very good at encouraging me to stretch myself and teaching me about risk-taking. And as part of that process, I was able to kind of investigate ideas that inspired me. And in 1997 or 1998, I was offered a meeting with this little Canadian company called Research in Motion, and which, everyone knows now was the precursor to BlackBerry.
Yeah. And
I went to a meeting in New York with the CFO, and he pulled out what they called a BlackBerry pager, a RIM pager actually, which is a little thing that looked like a pager, but it had a keyboard on it. And he asked me what my email address was, and I gave it to him. I actually had to look up my email address first because I didn't know what it was. And he typed something into this little box, and he said, "I just sent you an email wirelessly."
Wow.
And I didn't really believe him. I mean, this is the late 90s, and no one was talking about sending email wirelessly. And I got back to my office, and sure enough, there it was on my computer. And I went to Lou, and I told him that there's this amazing Canadian company that I think's going to transform the way we communicate, and we should make an investment. And he was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so he asked for the annual report, and Lou's the most cerebral person that I've ever met, and he's able to get a picture of an opportunity very quickly. And he read through the annual report, and he closed it, and he said, "You need to go to Canada." And so he sent me up to Canada to do my research.
Wow.
And we ended up making an investment, and BlackBerry Research in Motion, which renamed itself BlackBerry, ended up being a very successful company. But that experience inspired me to think that maybe there's more opportunities like that in Canada that are being overlooked simply because they're not in Silicon Valley.
Right.
So in end of 2001, I left Lou's firm and started my own business, Northern Border Investments, to focus on Canada.
Thank you.
Hence the name. That was a very long answer to your question.
No, thank you so much. And I understand you are coming to Canada quite often when your business were heavily invested in Canada.
Yeah, I used to be in Canada almost every month, but things changed over the years for a whole host of reasons, and we focus more on the U.S. now. So this is my first time back to Toronto in it's 10 or 12 or 15 years.
Wow! Yeah. Yay! Welcome back.
Yeah, it's really fun to be back. I like Canada and Toronto, and great place.
Good to hear it.
Yeah.
I did look up the book you mentioned by Lou, his autobiography, some of it. It's not sold in Canada, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to buy that on Amazon, maybe ship it to you. The next time I come to New York, I can come collect it.
Yeah, the sum of it all.
The sum of it all.
It's a great story of his life.
So Chris, you were very successful as a businessman, as an investment person. What took you, I guess, was there a particular journey that got you to start on the philanthropical activities? I
had this idea banging around in my head for a long time that it would be fun to have and rewarding to have some kind of entity that could be loosely tied to the business, that if the business was successful, it might be able to help other people. And even when I was a little kid, I always remember wanting to have my own business and wanting to be successful. And wouldn't it be fun to make enough money to be independent? And I think sometimes God smiles at those, individualistic plans and says, okay, but the end result may not be exactly as you're envisioning it. So I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunities I've had and to be given the breaks that people like Lou gave me in business. And I was able to achieve some of my financial goals. And when that happened, I feel like God gave me the opportunity to use that to bless other people.
Bless, as in helping?
Yeah.
Was that before or after the running incident?
It was about the same time.
Tell us more.
About the running incident?
Yeah.
So I used to do a lot of competitive running.
Sprinting? Marathons?
Yeah, so they call it middle distance. So I focused on the 800 meters, which is the half mile.
That's not short.
Yeah, it's the best way I've ever heard the 800 meters described was it simulates drowning.
What?
Yeah.
To late drowning?
It simulates drowning.
Simulates.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
So by the time you reach 600 meters, there's nothing left in your lungs, and you've used most of the oxygen in your blood, and it's an incredibly painful experience. But it makes it a pure race. So I did that about 10 years. I was very focused on running and work for about 10 years. And I had led a very unhealthy lifestyle before that, which we can talk about if you want. But at the end of that 10-year period, I was running just a fun, training run on this cross-country course in the Bronx. And it got dark sooner than I had anticipated. And I decided not to do another loop of the course and to run back to my car. And I was running through this slightly wooded area, and it was dark at this point. And my foot got caught in a root bundle, and I had had 100 different running injuries up until that point, but this one was different. As I fell, it corkscrewed my femur out of the socket.
Oh.
And in the process, shattered my pelvis. And so I'm lying there in this wooded area in the Bronx by myself, no cell phone, and it's dark, and I know I have to get back to my car. Wow. And so I stand up and I start hopping, and I have to hop down this hill, and every hop was like an ice pick in my spine. And I got down to the bottom of this hill, and then there's this 200-foot bridge that goes across a swamp. And I noticed a set of posts across that bridge. And so I just focused on getting to the first post. And I got to the first post, and I leaned against it, and I caught my breath. And then I set my focus on the next post, and hop, 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 every one like an ice pick in my spine. And I got to the next one and rested, to the next one, rested, to the next one, rested. And I finally got across that bridge, up another hill, and to my car. And I ended up in the hospital for 11 days and 8 hours of surgery. And I couldn't walk for 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
And when I was able to walk, I decided to go back to that cross-country course in the Bronx. And when I got there and I went to that bridge, I noticed that while there was a post at the beginning and a post at the end, there were no posts along the span of that bridge. And there never had been. In other words, it wasn't designed with posts along its spans. But I remember leaning. I can still feel the physical sensation of leaning on each one of those posts. It was
Sign from God?
I think God gave me a way home. when I needed it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, I think we get little reminders along the way that when we're in difficult situations, we have some extra help, you know? I've noticed that along the course of my journey that, particularly with people, God puts people in my life at critical junctures to make sure I go the right way.
Who else are on your critical junctures?
Well, Lou for sure, who offered me my first job after business school. I have a dear friend who sadly is no longer with us, who was a Calgarian, actually. His name was George Gossby. And I spent 10 years of my life from college until the time that until the time I was working with Lou, where I was an alcoholic. And I guess you would say I was a functioning alcoholic because I was able to get through business school, advance my career, do a lot of very productive work. But it was not a sustainable lifestyle. And when I finally gave up drinking, I was also a heavy smoker.
Wow, Chris.
and I had given up smoking as well. And this is a long introduction to George Gossby. And it was 3 months after I'd gotten sober. It was in September of 2001, and a very memorable time. And George and I were with a group of people traveling somewhere, and we watched the Twin Towers fall on TV. We were in Italy, and we saw the towers fall, and it felt like the end of the world. No one knew what was going to be next. And George had been my drinking buddy. And so I looked over at George and I said, let's go get drunk. And meanwhile, he had just seen me go through this excruciating process of stopping drinking.
Yeah.
And I fully expected him to say, yeah, you're back, let's go. And he didn't skip a beat. He just looked at me and he said, no effing way.
Oh.
And so that was a critical juncture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. I do want to say one last thing as we wrap. The way I've only known you for 5 weeks, but I feel like I've known you for longer. It seems like this is how you talk about when you run your 800 meters, that this is your preferred length of race, where you drop every single drop in the tank as you reach the finish line. I feel like this is how you're living your life too, consistently putting yourself in otherwise dangerous situations. I remember you really dislike the word legacy. You maybe first tell us, why do you feel that word? Why do you dislike that word? And what do you want to leave behind?
So I don't dislike the word legacy per se. I just feel like too often when people focus on legacy, it's the result of being fearful of dying and wanting to leave something of themselves behind so that people will remember them. And the reality is that most of us will be forgotten very soon after we die. It's just the way of things. People move on.
Oh.
And I think that it's better to focus our energy on the here and now and doing all we can in this brief life that we have. And I believe strongly that that God has given each of us talents and a sphere of influence, and that each of us has a unique purpose. And when we figure out what that purpose is, I think we should use the gifts that God has given us recklessly and we need to do it here and now. And if those things shine a light on Jesus and glorify God, then that's a great result. That's the result that I hope anything that I do has. More of him and less of me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jing.
I appreciate the conversation.
It's really fun to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Be Brilliant with Jing Lang. We hope you found valuable insights and motivation to fuel your journey. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And share this with 3 people in your life endeavoring to achieve personal greatness. Remember, brilliance is within you, and every step you take brings you closer to your best self. Keep striving, keep shining, and until next time, stay brilliant.